think all of us know the importance of Occupy Wall Street within the context of today's politics. A lot of chapters have been engaged with Occupy movements across the country, and it very much coincides with our concerns and ideas of social and economic justice. So for this panel, we have Evan Hoskins, who is the president of Temple Democratic Socialists. He and many of the other chapter members have been very active in the Occupy Philly movement. A contingent of the Temple chapter was also arrested during one of the final police raids on the Occupy camp. And then we have Louis Caza. Okay. Who is the founder of the Penn State YDS Chapter. The Penn chapter has been working with a coalition of the NAACP, the College Democrats and Republicans, Greek Life, and others to fight back against rising tuition on Penn State campus. And then we'll have Sarah McDaniel Dyer, who primarily works in the publishing industry. She's an active volunteer with the Occupy Student Debt Campaign. And if you want more information about the Occupy Student Debt Campaign, make sure to talk to her after the plenary. And then we have Mary Clinton, who is a 25-year-old organizer working for Local 2110 of the United Auto Workers. Before moving to New York, she organized in the student anti-war movement and led field campaigns in North Dakota around progressive public policy and the midterm elections. She has since been involved in the anti-austerity movement in New York as a participant in the Bloombergville encampment and is organizing with Occupy Wall Street. She has been involved with bridging the gap between labor and the Occupy movement at the national level through the AFL-CIO Young Workers. You can follow her at MS Mary Clinton, where she tweets articles and events involving Occupy Wall Street and labor, including the hashtag Occupy Sotheby's. 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 I'm from Kansas, I don't understand that. Fight to end the lockout. Mary is also a member of the Organization for a Free Society and suffers from a severe Facebook addiction. And so with that, we're going to start with Evan. Take it away. I will give you a microphone.
When Occupy Philadelphia first set up on a beautiful September morning at Dilworth Plaza in Philadelphia, it was definitely a very validating experience, I would say, for us Temple Democratic Socialists and Philly Democratic Socialists of America members who went down on the first day, because, for years we have always been pushing for these issues of social justice and economic inequality, and to bring them to the surface. But it's got kind of lonely. I mean, the national conversation wasn't focusing on these issues, and there was a lot of problems in getting the attention drawn to them. And so it felt like our lonely voices were finally being resonated with a chorus of all different types of people from various political backgrounds coming together to really start talking. And so we were there, we bought our DSA banner and we were waving it very proudly. We saw, the first working groups being set up and written down, and we witnessed the first General Assembly at our plaza, and we were just floored and amazed and so excited for what was to come. And the big question and the big issue that we faced was, how could we, as Temple Democratic Socialist members, bring this energy back to our campus? And over the course of this semester and over this next semester, we are going to be continuing to do that. And the first thing that I feel like what we did was we used Temple Democratic Socialists as a springboard to really get involved with Occupy Philadelphia. We built a lot of community bonds with Occupy Philadelphia and with the greater Philadelphia community as well throughout the semester. A couple of events that TDS were able to organize Temple students to go to were things like Aramark strikes of concession workers in our sports venues not being paid just wages and their hours being cut, so we went to the Aramark offices to protest and stand in solidarity with them. There was a lot of big events around, centering around the PNCs and the PNC banks in the Philadelphia area because of their relationship with, environmentally harmful practices of mountaintop removal. So there were a bunch of Temple Democratic Socialist members. We were all sprawled out on the street in a die-in. It was a lot of fun. And a couple other things. We caroled with SCIU and workers at the Presby's nursing home outside of the Presby, or the board member's house, who was busting unions, and we were singing union-themed carols. And so it was just this constant energy of every week you'd show up to our Temple Democratic Socialist meetings. They'd always have on the board what's happening over the next week and how you can get involved with what's happening at Occupy. We always tried to make it to the GAs, and we were a very strong presence, I would say, on the campus. And even outside of Occupy, we built strong relationships with other organizations that worked with Occupy, but we're also close to the North Philly area where we were. And one of those big organizations was this group called Fight for Philly. And they are a nonprofit organization that, and non-private, I guess, because they are public. But so it's a nonprofit organization that I think the great thing about Fight for Philly is it tackles a lot of the similar issues that Occupy does in terms of getting more money for our school district and fighting back against banks who give predatory loans. But it brings these issues to the communal level, away from the encampment and into the communities, going into North Philly to go to these meetings. And honestly, the best part for me for working for Fight for Philly is I've had a lot of internal conflicts personally about, how I definitely am a socialist and I really believe that workers need need standard living conditions, and that it's not, it's a moral issue that I stand really strongly behind, but I mean, I'm a white kid from the suburbs, and I never really had a lot of experience growing up with the working class in terms of actual intimate relations, and building personal bonds, and this really helped me with that. And it really kind of quelled any sort of feelings that I had that maybe this is just like sublimating some, personal problems onto a national issue, and that I really was able to build strong bonds with these working class people through Fight for Philly. And one of the things that we did was on November, I believe it was November 28th, the Market Street Bridge in Philadelphia is collapsing. It's on the brink of collapse. It's failed all safety regulation tests that has been administered on it, and we are pushing to build jobs by renovating this bridge, and building a bridge that's actually safe for Philadelphians to use to commute. And me and about 24 other Fight for Philly members, we sat down on the bridge and refused to leave when the police came to disperse us, and we all got arrested to bring light to this issue. And it was a really, great experience, to spend, 20 hours in, close confinement with these people, just really get to talking, and really just making great friends. Jail was definitely a bonding experience for me. And so we did a lot of work with Occupy Philadelphia, constantly going down, but that's not enough. I mean, campuses are insular communities, and there's pros and cons to that. How can we, as Temple Democratic Socialists, bring Occupy Philly to Temple? I mean, you can't just go down. There's more that has to be done. And this was the issue that I personally thought was going to be very difficult, because I remember last year, when people were working for a lot of these causes before the Occupy movement started, it was a big, sense of atrophy, I would say, in the community. I mean, it was hard just to get a bunch of students to congregate in the middle of campus and scream, "Fuck student debt." I felt like we were dealing with, wrestling people out of Plato's caves, it was so difficult. And so that's what I thought we'd be facing when we started to bring the Occupy movement to Temple campus. And I've been floored by the responsiveness of the Temple community to our efforts. one of the main things that was done was we set up with other members of the Temple community, we set up an Occupy Temple contingent. And what the Occupy Temple contingent does is we meet weekly to discuss the issues on Temple University and to discuss the events around the area and on our campus. And a couple things we organized is we organized 2 walkouts for education, where we got a lot of people to congregate outside, leave their classes, and march down to the Occupy Philly encampment from our school. And so that brought a lot of attention. We had a really awesome people's mic at our bell tower where we were able to bring a lot of different students with varying issues, not all supportive of Occupy. There were a lot of people who had hesitancies and doubts and did not support us at all. A lot of different libertarians who showed up even as well to talk with us. But that's great because they used the people's mic format. And so it was just this kind of inculcation of like Occupy customs and practices into the community, and everyone was really responsive. We were there for like 3-4 hours talking with our community, something we've never done before. And so we work with Occupy Temple, and another thing Occupy Temple did is we served as a model for other Occupy contingents and universities around the area. We were integral in we set up a Southeastern Pennsylvania College conference where we met up with students from Penn and Drexel and Haverford and Bryn Mawr and other colleges around the area to start unifying in our struggle against the administration and against our universities. And we also were we had a very strong presence at Occupy Philly events. I mean, I always would look around at Occupy Philly events and see tons of Temple kids, outnumbering all other university demographics of kids from other universities. And another big thing that happened was, as you mentioned, on the night of the eviction, I believe about 15 Temple students were arrested. Some of us in civil disobedience, others just for being on the wrong side of the sidewalk. And 6 of those students were Temple Democratic Socialists. And another great event, I was thinking about it, was we also had a sit-in at the PNC Bank on Temple campus to protest the relationship with mountaintop removal. And there was arrests as well there. So there was this real acceleration of student activism, which for me makes sense. I mean, if you look at it, this atrophy that we've experienced is a complete fucking anomaly, I mean, history of student activism is long and rich and pretty constant. I mean, we always love to go back to the civil rights movement, and that's a great example, but it goes even farther. In 1848, in Austria, when the students, did not like the way that Metternich essentially was ruling the country, they took it over. The fucking provisional government and the revolutionary government was led by Austrian university students in their university. And so there's always been this strong kind of tradition of students learning these new great liberal ideologies and liberal ideas and then practicing them. And it's only within these past 10, 15 years that that's kind of fallen out. And so we need to start that up again. This is a tradition that can't die. It's important. It's important for progress. It's important for our country, and it's important for our world. And you even see that outside of the United States. I mean, all other protest movements that are happening right now are huge university percentages of university students are involved. And so we're bringing it back to the Temple. We're bringing it back to Philadelphia. And so now we have to think, where now? We have another semester coming up, and what needs to happen? And 2 things I think about is where to go from here, and also, what is Temple Democratic Socialists? What is our role here? I mean, I had a couple people come up to me and they asked me from the Occupy Temple contingent, look, I mean, you guys have done a lot of great work, but what's the point of having Temple Democratic Socialists outside of the Occupy Temple movement? Like, what's the point of keeping our chapters alive? And why don't we just, move right in with the Occupy movement? And, my answer to that is that TDS, we've served as a strong grassroots force for years on the Temple campus, and we continue to do so. We have a lot of power, a lot of manpower. to put up flyers, to canvass, to get information out and use publicity. And we also have a lot of our great ideas that we want to keep at the forefront of the movement. And one of the things that Temple University, or Temple Democratic Socialists have been doing specifically is that Occupy Temple, throughout this spring semester, they're going to be focusing a lot on budget cuts. We're doing a lot of work with the March 1st walkout, and we're going to our Governor Corbett's office, and we're going to be rallying out there. But so what I wanted to do with Temple Democratic Socialists is I want us to focus all of our energy specifically on our campus and on our administration. Because we need to build concrete change. It's essential. Because we can't let this morale die. We can't let all this new enthusiasm fade away. We can't let our limbs stiffen, as is said. So what Temple Democratic Socialists have been doing, we've been doing two main things right now. We have a teach-in series. We've been calling like an Occupy Your Mind Winter Teach-in series, where we bring a lot of different professors and other speakers to come and talk to us about the current financial and political crises in our nation and how we're going to fix them. Last week we started off, we had one of our great professors, John Raines, come and talk about the student debt crisis. This Tuesday we are having a speaker named Tricia Colby come, who's an ex-stockbroker on Wall Street, coming to spill the beans on how hedge funds work and how it's been turning our economy into a global casino. So these are really important because it's important to have this information, but just as they did in the 60s, teach-ins are key as recruitment tools. You get the information out, and then what do you do with the information? The information is empowering for the people in the audience. When they attend these teach-ins, students get enraged about what's happening, and it heightens their desire to make change. So we're hoping to build a stronger base. And that also is involved with reaching out to the Temple community, reaching out to other student groups, reaching out to student government, reaching out to people, kids in the dorms, and just kind of letting them know what's happening. Because you can't build strong change without validity and legitimacy, and you can't have legitimacy without this popular front of students. And another thing, the big thing we've been pushing is we have this petition going around demanding three things mainly at Temple University. One, that they implement a tuition freeze for the next year, because we've already been crushed by tuition increases over the past years, and we can't have any more. We can't bear any more. And also, Temple University has a specific problem of being a very top-down institution. They have a board of trustees that makes all the decisions on how our tuition money and how the donation money is spent, and we have no say in the matter. Temple students are not allowed to attend board of trustees meetings. What the fuck? This is our money. We're the benefactors of this institution. Why can't we decide how this money is spent? And so one of the things we're asking for is student access to this board of trustees meetings. And so we've been going around dorm storming, and getting the word out, and we want to continue to build on this momentum and really affect change and start this progressive movement on campuses up again. Thank you.
So I'm here to talk about Occupy Penn State and how we got started. Basically, a couple of YDS members, we came down to the first day of Occupy Wall Street, and building from that energy on the car ride back to Penn State, we were like talking more about it, and it would be, at that point it was a really great idea to bring the movement to Penn State, because last year we took over our student building because of the budget cuts proposed by Corbett, and the media that we got was like amazing, and we got a lot from that. And then we decided to build from that and continue Corbett Build, that's what we called it. And the beginning, it was just a couple members, just YDS. And we got together and we formed a group called Spark, which is a Student Progressive Alliance now at our school. And then we use that as a tool in order to reach out to all the other groups on campus. And from that, we made a Facebook group, a website, and we started, basically, Facebook was our main thing to recruit more members into the core group that was to become Occupy Penn State. Basically, Penn State culture revolves around partying and football, so there's a lot of apathy on our campus. It's really hard to capture the attention of students and get them involved in political actions or get them aware of what's going on around them. So we had to come with very creative actions in order to capture their attention. And one of them was we had a naked protest. And we standed outside of our student union building, just almost naked, surrounded by cops and just students and media. And that was just the start of a bunch of actions we had that week in order to promote Occupy Penn State. And from that point on, the next night, we had a meeting with our core group. Our core group went from 10 students to 50 students. And eventually we came up with more ideas for campaigns in order to bring aware that Occupy Penn State's coming, and we're going to take over our university. And another protest we did was a bike protest. We told people to wear black and get on their bikes. So, and the point was to ride around campus with vuvuzelas and kind of just disrupt the daily motion of Penn State. And students just, would turn around and be like, what's going on? And they would ask questions, and they're like, how can I get involved? This is really cool. And we did that for one day, and then you just see like this massive black wave of people on bicycles just riding through campus with vuvuzelas and professors just coming to us and asking questions. And then eventually we had then the next day we had professors on our core group that were coming together and helping out. So the core group met for a couple of times before Occupy Penn State, the first day of Occupy Penn State, and we came up with goals that we wanted and the reason why we were occupying our student hall. And we were going to go with the lower tuition, because Penn State is, I believe, the second most expensive private school. Public, sorry. Well, it's going to become private soon, in the nation. And also Corbett's just ripping our school apart with a bunch of stuff he's doing. And then from there, we also gave positions out to people. They volunteered who would handle food and media and everything else. And then the first day of Occupy Penn State started. And that day we came to the student building and we were completely surrounded. There was cops, not in riot gear, but just kind of intimidating us. And also we also had media come up from Philly, and we had someone from NBC, I think, come up too. So they were out there just asking questions, and then we started occupying. At the first GA that we had that night, we had a bit over 100 students, which is a lot, especially at Penn State, since most rallies we had were about 50 students last semester when we just had like minor rallies. And from that day on, we started having a bit of problems. People that got involved in Occupy Penn State, they didn't have experience organizing, and also they had a different point of view of direction to go with what we were planning to go. So the core wanted to work at a local level. We wanted to work with the Penn State community and also the State College community, which is where Penn State is located. And then there was another group that wanted to go at the national level with what Occupy Wall Street was in with their goals. And this led to intense discussion for about 2 weeks, and everyone was getting frustrated because we didn't have goals or the direction we were going. And then after week 3 of discussion, we started losing media and attention from students, and also because we spent so much time discussing, we had no actions going on while Occupy Penn State was going on, and then the media from our campus was saying that we were just a nuisance, and that we were just like just there. Then YDS, our YDS chapter got together, and brainstormed ideas of how we can get the energy back up again and how we could get everyone motivated, because everyone was really getting unmotivated after week 3. And we decided to reach out to the college Republicans. So we actually, Penn State YDS has our biggest allies are the college Republicans. And they have helped us through a lot of rallies because they're also in the same position with us with lower tuition and budget cuts. And the college Democrats completely left us in the dust. So it's kind of funny. So we reached out to the college Republicans. They brought in their members to the next GA. And then the cool thing was everyone ended up agreeing, except there were certain people that got into intense debate, like, why are the Republicans here? You know, it just defeats the whole purpose of what we're doing. And there was a lot of tension going on through that GA. And then the college Libertarians showed up. So that was a massive GA that we had. There was we had also the NAACP there, and it was actually, the turnout was like great. We Penn State YDS completely took over the GA, and we decided that instant we dropped all our politics, and we together as Penn State students needed to come up with the goals that we want to send out to the administration. So that immediately, that GA, we drafted a letter and to President Spanier, who was there at the moment, who was a total asshole. And then our demand was basically more student transparency, and also we also wanted an open budget to see where our money was going to, and also we wanted a member of the progressive movement at our school at board meetings, and also involved with, and then creating another group of students that will be involved with budgeting and tuition problems at our school. So we sent out the draft letter, and we sent it in, and we met with the administration the next day, and we talked more, and they were like, they kind of threatened us. They were like, shut down Occupy Penn State and we'll give you your demands. And we didn't go that direction. We were like, we'll meet again, we'll talk it with the GA. Next GA was like, we have to do more actions in order to do that. So we started having more rallies outside the student hub and build more momentum. Then we threatened them to take over we have a building called Old Main where the administration is there. And they were afraid of that because during that they didn't want more media, because on top of that they had the Sandusky incident that just began after that. And we met with them, and eventually they were like, okay, you know, we'll set up another meeting with just members of YDS and a couple people from Occupy Penn State, and we'll discuss your goals and see what we can do. And they drafted a letter. They drafted a letter to Occupy Penn State saying that, you know, we're willing to meet with a couple members and stuff. Then, after that, what happened, the biggest thing that happened was the firing of Joe Paterno. That completely brought down Occupy Penn State because all the media shifted from that to Joe Paterno. And then everyone just kind of lost momentum, and Occupy Penn State completely went down. But even though it went down, it ended in a direction that we didn't want it to go. We had a really good outcomes with Occupy Penn State. We built a strong relationship with the administration now. Also, there's more transparency with students and the administration. Our new president, because of Penn State YDS and Occupy Penn State, he now sends out weekly emails to all 40,000 students saying what the university is doing that week when it comes to tuition problems, and also with certain events around campus. Also, I and another member of YDS got invited to another student group which the administration formed that will handle all the problems with tuition and figure out a way that we can have a more effective budget. And also, we got invited into Board of Trustees meetings. So now we have a member of our group at Board of Trustees meeting all the time. And even though we have no say in the meetings, but just having that presence there is like the first step. And as of right now, we are trying to bring Occupy Penn State back because we're getting attacked again with budget cuts, and Penn State is thinking of privatizing. And Penn State is a land-grant institution, and that will completely defeat the whole purpose of that. So we're getting together again, a couple members, and trying to bring it back up. We don't know how it's going to turn out, but hopefully it will turn out great. And then also we're going to be working with the problems we're having in Pennsylvania with fracking, which is a huge deal, especially outside of State College. We have a town called Snowshoe, which the community is completely getting destroyed from the hydro fracking, and we want to work with them. So we have a couple campaigns that we're thinking of with getting Occupy Penn State going again, and also Penn State YDS. And that's mostly what we've been working on this semester.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah,
A
little louder.
So I'm from the Occupy Student Debt Campaign, and we started end of September, early October, when Andrew Ross, a professor at NYU, gave a open forum talk about how student debt is basically turning us all into indentured servants. And he came up with this idea that we should start a pledge of refusal, that when we would reach a certain number of signers, we would en masse default, stop paying our student loans. And a bunch of us in the crowd were like, yeah, that's a good idea, let's do that. So we started the Occupy Student Debt Campaign. And we're based on 4 principles. The first is that we should have free public institutions. So all 2- and 4-year public institutions like CUNY should be free. And that there should be interest-free student loans for private institutions, that institutions should open their books and tell us where our money is going, basically, because no one knows. And that all student loan debt should be written off. And the current pledge is that when we reach 1 million signers, we will en masse default. And we launched our campaign on November 21st, and it was a couple weeks, like a week or so after Liberty Plaza got taken down. So that was, we had less of a crowd there than we wanted, but we had a really good media presence there, and we got a lot of news in the beginning, and things slowed down a little bit because of holidays and all that stuff, but we were picking up again, and we're actively working with NYU to help them there. NYU's they want to build 2 buildings that'll cost, I think, about $6 billion, and we're trying to get them to stop that. So we're working with Occupy NYU and the Lower East Side Historical Society and a bunch of other groups there. And and we're going to have an event on November 25th. We're declaring it 1T Day, 1 trillion day, the day that student loan debt in the US reaches $1 trillion, which will surpass all consumer debt, like the amount of consumer debt that we have. And that's my introduction. Thanks.
Hey everybody. So Andrew called me up and asked me to talk a little bit about OWS and how it started, how I've been involved, and where I think it's going. So I'll try to talk fast and get you out of here before 2013. But I'm an organizer, and I'm currently working for Local 2110, and we represent the workers at Columbia University, and we're working with Occupy Columbia to put pressure on the administration to win a fair contract. And I think that's one way. I'll talk about this a little bit later, but of like how occupying campuses can really bring the spirit of OWS to their college campuses and advocate for things like tuition freezes, and it was incredible to hear about y'all's experiences with that. Okay, so I first got involved with Occupy Wall Street when I saw a Facebook event that said #Occupy Wall Street, and I'd been a participant in a Bloombergville encampment, which was a 3-week encampment at City Hall with Chris Maisano and some others from YDS to protest the devastating budget cuts. And there's like a shit occupiers say, or like shit fill in the blank people say. I'm sure like maybe you've seen it on YouTube. And one of the things is like, I was at Bloombergville, like with some sort of like Trump, like I've been here before Occupy Wall Street existed. But it was a challenge to be like how do you respond to a Facebook event or like an Adbusters ad that's like really sexy with a ballerina on a charging bull? I mean, is that real like bottom up grassroots organizing? Is this even real? Is this just like a social media thing? Like what's going on? And so a group that I was like working with, New Yorkers Against Budget Cuts, we helped to set up a general assembly on August 2nd, which was the day of the debt ceiling deal, at the Charging Bull, to one, protest the devastating debt ceiling deal because it was shitty, and then also to take the bull by the horns, to decide democratically what we're going to do about this, because we've clearly lost control, and the 1% is dominating over our lives, and like, what are we going to do about that? So we had a speak out, and there was agitation, and people told personal stories about how they were affected by the budget cuts, how they will be affected by the debt ceiling deals, and the sort of corporatocracy that we're living in. And then also, meet and develop subgroups. And we decided we were going to occupy Wall Street. We were going to get as close to Wall Street as possible, if not on Wall Street, which we didn't think would be possible. And we developed subgroups. We developed outreach, social media. We figured out how were we going to feed the hopefully thousands of people that we're reaching out to come and create the critical mass necessary to hold a space in downtown Manhattan. So this was like a really daunting task for many of us, and like I said, there were definitely tensions between people who had been in New York a little bit longer and had footholds in grassroots organizing. And it seemed like this new thing that like wasn't actually going to materialize. And then September 17th happened, and some of you in this room were there, and we held this space. Which exceeded my expectations, even as somebody who had been working on that. And we not only did that, but we inspired encampments across the country, and that was like really exciting to see. I guess one thing that I've been working on, once Occupy Wall Street happened and we were holding space, it was like, crap, now we have to grow. Not only do we have to maintain, not only do we have to feed these thousands of people, but we also have to grow and we have to build momentum. And so I've been working on the Labor Outreach Committee, and there was a Young Workers AFL-CIO conference in Minneapolis 2 weeks after the occupation started. So I got on a train and went to Minneapolis and talked about Occupy Wall Street, led a workshop, and made a proposal for them to support Occupy Wall Street. It passed, which was exciting because I saw labor movement is in decline, and I think we need to see some new tactics, or maybe some old tactics at a new time being tried out. And I was hoping that through Occupy Wall Street, maybe the labor movement could re-energize that. So the Young Workers passed it. That put on some necessary pressure to the executive board of the AFL-CIO to make a decision. Are they in on this crazy Occupy Wall Street thing going on, or are they just gonna sit on the sidelines and be supportive but not really involved? Well, fortunately, the pressure from young workers and also many locals and central labor councils around the country put the pressure necessary on the executive, which came in to be in favor of Occupy Wall Street, which came in handy when we needed cleaning supplies or we needed thousands of people to come and defend Zuccotti Park at 5 in the morning, things like that. So that has been one area that I've been working at. And also, I think, the whole idea of an encampment, basically an organizer's dream come true, right? Like organizing is basically, comes down to a lot of problem solving. You're confronted with a challenge, you identify a strategy, a solution to overcoming that challenge, and using shared resources among people with shared values or interests in overcoming that challenge together, you're able to get around that. And if you could think of the number of challenges that come up when you're organizing an encampment, that's crazy, whether it be fights breaking out and you need mediation, or food, or there's a march coming up, or there's tensions between labor and a specific group in Occupy Wall Street, which we're seeing with like May 1st. I mean, there's definitely things coming up constantly, and working together to get through that has been really rewarding and like one of the best aspects of Occupy Wall Street. So I also wanted to touch on, there are definitely some tensions, although like working to defend Zuccotti Park showed definitely some serious cooperation with Occupy Wall Street and the labor movement, and also the Occupy Sotheby's campaign. There are workers who are art handlers at an auction house where the top 1% of the top 1% shops in the Upper East Side. They've been locked out since August, and really it's been really difficult on the workers. There are only 42 of them, and so it's hard to put the pressure necessary on the employer to actually stop the lockout. I think the Occupy Sotheby's campaign is a great example of how the occupiers and the labor unions work together, and the students as well. And what we did was, while the Teamsters or the art handlers were locked out, while they were on the picket line, we actually went into the auction, and we disrupted the auctions, and we actually went in there and we took video of it, and said that while you're spending tens of thousands of dollars on these art pieces, there are workers locked out outside who can't feed their families. And so we were able to, we also expanded that to different restaurants that the board of Sotheby's were owning, and there were a lot of sort of ways that we as occupiers could put pressure on Sotheby's that the art handlers weren't able to do because of the confines of labor law. And so together, there's this great harmony. However, we're in 2012. It's an election year, and there's also been a call for a general strike on May 1st, which is great. But it's also been some points of tension between Occupy and the labor movement. It's no surprise that the labor movement endorses political candidates that many people feel like don't represent our interests. And so there's some tension around, do we protest out the DNC or do we go there? And I think we have to protest at the DNC. I think labor ought to be protesting at the DNC around the issues that aren't being sufficiently addressed. And even if they are endorsing those candidates that are on the inside, I think there has to be that rallying cry on the outside, putting on that pressure. The Occupy the Primary stuff, I think, that happened in New Hampshire. I don't know if many of you have heard of or been following the primary elections, but I think that's also another great way where Labor and Occupy have worked together, an example of how Labor could work to affect the framework of the debate. What happened at Occupy the primary was a series of disruptions. Like Romney was getting mic checked. Chris Christie came. They had a little pep rally, and they were disrupted and called out for killing jobs. And also, people went to events where the candidates were asked the really tough questions and putting them in a tough position. And what this did, as the candidates are garnering all of this media attention and saying the same things over and over and over again, what this did was actually give the reporters something new to talk about. And when you looked at the press coverage of these events, that was the focal point of it. And so I think that was like a really great way of how labor unions and Occupy can work together. I think it shouldn't just be on the Republican candidates. I think it should be throughout this electoral process. But with this crazy primary season, I think I hope that those type of tactics are being used across the country, and continuing this discussion on getting money out of politics and personhood. Not catering to the interests of the 1%. And there are also, so where we're heading, we have a lot of work to do. Like, we're still fighting for the 8-hour day, let alone creating a type of world that we want to live in. And I think reconciling some of these tensions is going to be definitely necessary, but we should also be reconsidering the way we think about being political. We have been organizing assemblies in neighborhoods and at workplaces and around various issues, and connecting those assemblies hopefully to an all-city assembly, which is happening on April 14th. So I think that's a great way of people to realize the agency that we have as individuals, that when we act collectively, that we can win things. And certainly, our long-term strategy might be much more than setting up like a daycare collective in our neighborhood where the city has cut funding for that. But at the same time, it's important to fight for these types of services that we need, and to take care of our immediate needs so that we can, live a life we want to live in the short term. So, that's about it. And I hope if there's anything that people take away from that, it's that understanding that Occupy Wall Street, I don't know if anybody knew what kind of an impact it would have worldwide, but when enough people put their chips in on this gamble, it actually opened up a ton of possibilities. And so I hope people take away just a nugget of optimism and a sense of appreciation of that possibility, and as we go back to our campuses and our communities and have crazy ideas like camping out in front of the administrator's offices, that it might work and then we might win things, and that it's important to be positive and work together. And I'm really excited to hear what comes up ahead for you all in 2012. And if you have any questions, follow me on Twitter.
Okay, we're going to do short question and answer. So if you have a question, raise your hand, and I will call on you. Kyle?
Yeah, this pertains to the mass default and student debt. When I think of it, and there was a speaker that said something about this yesterday, there might be that might have a negative effect. When they're trying to collect this money, they'll go to your parents, they'll go to whoever. Wouldn't it just double? It just put you in debt double?
Yeah, if you default, they will basically take any monetary assistance you can get. Any money you have, they can come and take, and they'll go after your co-signers as well. The point that we're trying to make is that for a lot of people, default is coming anyway, and that a lot of people have the choice of default and deal with that on your own, or you can stand in solidarity with a million other people and say this has to change. And when you have a million people, when you have a large group of people, then you can affect change, as we're starting to see. So, and historically, when you have had debt refusals in other countries, they don't come after everyone. You know, if you win, then you win, and you aren't punished for it. And the goal is to win.
Hey, yeah, I had a similar question along that lines. The issue with private lenders is that they are insured in such a way that they actually make more money off of us defaulting and paying back. They don't really have anything to risk from us not paying back. They benefit from us defaulting. So when we look at things like massive no pay actions, basically they would get bailed out by the U.S. government, who they're insured by, and come from them anyway. And moreover, I feel like this is a much higher risk action to take for working class people. I have no safety net. I'm probably going to default anyway. So I don't really have a choice. But if I could pay it, I probably would. Because things like my tax returns make such a much difference to me. So, you know, I guess I was wondering how is this going to win if they're just going to get default insurance money anyway?
You're right, and I've been there myself. I've been close to default myself. What we need is solidarity and support from the rest of the country. They do make more money off us defaulting, but we need basically the government or the institutions to write off the debt. And we're hoping if we get enough people to stand together and we get enough people supporting us, that we can cause that change to happen.
Hi, yeah, I had a question. It kind of ties in earlier to what Wes was saying. But I mean, so from what I noticed, you know, Occupy Wall Street was in part inspired by what happened, for example, in Egypt. But it seems that a lot of people's sort of conception of what happened during is currently happening in the Egyptian insurrection is that, you know, people use a lot of Twitter and Facebook basically to organize each other. And I mean, so how do you confront people? And then they take that lesson and they say, okay, well maybe with Occupy Wall Street we can use Twitter and Facebook to organize people. But I mean, and that basically the problem with that is that the Egyptian insurrection was not organized basically with Facebook and Twitter. That did not, you know, I mean, they still busted over the secret police with RPGs and they burned all those secret documents. And you know, I mean, they still had once you come into contact with the material world, you can't just use the internet to start a revolution. You know, and so but the problem is that that stuff isn't reported for obvious reasons, you know, the media. And so people are coming around with these sort of connections that oh, this is what we have to do. And so you know, they create these movements where it's sort of largely ineffective. So I'm actually wondering if you guys as organizers, if you've encountered this, and kind of how do you work around getting people to educate them about how social revolutions and movements actually do happen, and how why that's those sort of approaches aren't going to work. Both for people who are totally Occupy Wall Street, I want to do this, let's do it, let's get on Twitter, and the people who are also well, why don't you guys just start a petition or something what? Have you guys had this problem? So that was not a call violent. I was just saying you know, obviously this organization happens.
We think I know for the Occupy Student Debt campaign, we have a Facebook and we have a Twitter, and we're using that as to try to get the word out to the most people, because we are currently based in New York. That's where the majority of our workers are. So we're using the internet to try to reach out to the rest of the country. But we're also, you know, we are planning actual events and actual things to do, and we're currently arguing over what is the best way to go about getting things done.
From a community organizing perspective as well, I don't see how the two don't go hand in hand. I mean, the fact of the matter is you're going to get more people at an event if you make a Facebook event about it and you send out the emails and you do the Twitter. So, I mean, a lot of times I think a key part of this social networking is advertising what's happening in, you know, the material, the real world. I mean, it really doubles, you know, the amount of people who will show up or even know about the event.
Yeah, I guess my question is more like, just like, you know, obviously you guys realize this, you know, we kind of realize this, but a lot of people are kind of like, okay, they think like if you tweet like hashtag down with the author, like hashtag don't privatize education, they think that's like actually going to not privatize education, as opposed to, I mean, that's not going to do anything like that. So it's like that, yeah, it's a publicity tool, yeah, but I guess I'm asking, how do you guys overcome like getting it beyond the point, just using that as an action?
Well, for us at Penn State, we kind of just use Twitter and YDS to kind of just send out events that we're having, and also Facebook to reach more. But we also did banner drumming, and we also flyered and kind of did stencils around campus to you know, say Occupy Penn State and all that. That was our other way of capturing that attention.
Mary, did you want to say something? Yeah. Danny.
Yeah, I just had a question for you. We were talking about coming together with the Republicans and the college fraternity. I found that really interesting in the sense that I guess like that you guys were united behind this, you know, like lowering student debt and keeping tuition the same or lowering tuition, getting access to administration. But like I guess would you see that? Do you think that hypothetically, did you think that kind of relationship would have gone further as you developed other like goals and drives? And like how follow-up question to that would be like, how would you handle visions in that? Like, do you think that you were like integrated to the point where it would have been like a really, really messy to tear apart, or was it kind of just building there?
Well, the thing with us with the college Republicans and the Libertarians was we still are going with that. We still have that relationship with, and none of us tear each other apart when it comes to that. I mean, like I said earlier, we dropped all our politics, and now we're just standing together, students, not only and you know, students that are about to graduate and are probably going to default on our loans, and that's the whole thing we're on. And we don't, for the future, we don't see that as a problem, because we are, one of our members from YDS is all really best friends with the president of the college Republican, and you know, that relation's still going to go on even if our politics are different.
To follow that up, Louis, what form did the communication between these multiple campus groups take? Like, did you have like large meetings where all the groups came, or was it core members that met with each other? How did you organize between like 3 different groups?
Between what our
Republicans and Libertarians and YDS and.
Well, the core, me and I guess presidents from each group got together and discussed what we were discussing, and we brought it to our group, and then we discussed it at our meetings, and then a couple members from YDS, like 5 members from each group, would get together the next day and kind of discuss that, and then bring it up to the GA, to our GA. That's how we kind of handled that, because we couldn't just go on as a massive group, because obviously there's going to be different oppositions, and also there was a lot of, at the first GA when we tried it as a massive group, there was a lot of fighting and arguing going on. So that's why we decided to kind of build that, like, you know, I guess like presidents meet, discuss, and then go to their group, and then come back again, and then bring it back to the GA. That's the way we handled that.
Not really a question, but just you know, I wanted to say that I found the stories from Penn State and Temple really inspiring. So, you know, props to you guys. You know, we're from U of R, and there's 10 of us here, which is pretty awesome. But it's my senior year, so it's taken like SDS at U of R, you know, 4 years to really pick up steam and pick up membership. But I think it's great what you guys are doing, and up. And I would also want to say to, not that we're by any means experts at organizing, but put on a rally, but just to all the other people here, don't discount the small actions. Because like the Solid says, that's how you build power, is you do these small actions that you can win at, and then you can take on larger campaigns. So props.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, our first rally ever at YDS had like 10 people. Then a couple months later, grew to like 30, 40, and just kept going after that.
Cecily?
Here. Hey.
Looking forward with your experience at Occupy Wall Street, what did Cornell West call it today? Spring
Offensive?
Spring Offensive, I like that. The Spring Offensive. Everybody's talking May Day, G8, all that. But beyond that, there's a lot of talk still going on about going back to the parks, right? Like going back to parallel social society structures. What do you think would be the ideal vision of re-emerging, visible Occupy Wall Street campaign? Does it include occupations and parallel? What are you thinking? Students, labor, and strategy.
Yeah, I don't think it's either or. I think there's some people that are adamant to go back to the parks. Like, we tried that. Now it's time to build alternative institutions, or now it's trying to occupy our workplace, or occupy a school that Bloomberg has decided to close. Or there's other ideas, and occupy our homes. That's one thing that people are saying, and take back the land in Rochester, represent. What y'all did in Rochester and defending homes that were being foreclosed is really incredible and been inspiring. And learning from Take Back the Land has been good, as we for the people that want to occupy foreclosed homes, for example, and put people who are homeless into homes that are vacant, or protect people who own their homes and are facing foreclosure because it's underwater. And so there's a couple things. I think if people want to occupy parks, that's great. I also think we have a lot of skill development to do. There's an Occupy spring training, or 99% spring training, something like that, that's happening where labor's committed to training 100,000 people in a week leading up, which is the week prior to the April 14th General Assembly, which is a really nice coincidence. And I think, there are definitely different ways. I think there's ways of bringing the spirit of Occupy Wall Street into campuses and things like that. But I think what's been a strength and also a weakness of Occupy is this sort of horizontalism, and sometimes there are things that you would rather not associate with that unfortunately now have an Occupy sort of brand on it, and that's a risk with the horizontal movement. However, one of the advantages is that it really expands the way that people participate, and going back to social media and stuff, it also becomes much more accessible. People are posting on Tumblr. Their personal stories. We are the 99%. Really, a unifying message. So there's a lot of different layers, and there's a lot of different components. And if it really expands the way that people are participating by having a lot of different things going on. And I don't think it's has to be, okay, we're just going to occupy all the foreclosed homes in New York, and that alone is going to keep us busy, so let's just do that. No, and I don't think it's that it has to be one specific tactic, and I think it should be a lot. And there are 99%, there are millions of us, so I don't see why that's not possible.
Also, what I see happening, and I think is going to continue to happen throughout the spring, is more occupations, not just for occupying's sake, but for specific goals and battles with the foreclosed homes. But there's also, in Philadelphia, there's been a lot of moves to occupy vacant lots and to turn them into profitable, a lot of times to be used to grow food or other ways, to make this barren lots, productive and fruitful for the community. And also, occupying with goals in terms of, I know at Temple there's been talks, and other universities have been talks about what an Occupy university would look like. And I don't see a university occupation just for like occupying as being successful. How I would see occupying in the university going is either taking a building or taking part of the public area and saying we are setting up here and not leaving until we come to an agreement on tuition freezes or student debt topics. So I just see that occupying taking more of a series of battles, I would say, and where you occupying being much more important. And
let's go with you.
Yeah, so this Occupy movement is like really inspiring to me because it's taken on these like really incredible values. It's anti-authoritarian, it's directly democratic, it's direct action oriented, and it's almost de facto anti-capitalist in that it is sort of in its language the 99% versus the 1% sort of de facto recognition of class society. So I guess like to me, what I'm wondering is, and this is sort of for folks in the room here, what do people think the role of revolutionaries is in maintaining these great principles that are in place? And like, so how do they imagine like sort of involving ourselves in that way? And my other question is, it seems to me like movements, maybe this is just my thing, but it seems to me like movements can do one of two things. They can either stagnate and decline, or they can accelerate and expand. They can't just kind of like just peter along with the same level. So like what I'm wondering is, again, folks in the room, we kind of got into this a little bit, but what do folks think expanding the struggle with Occupy looks like? Yeah.
Let's. Okay, go real quick.
Because that's a good discussion, but like real quick questions for the panelists. I think it's
Well, it's to everyone, including.
Yeah, including but.
We'll have the panel answer the question first.
Is that okay?
I mean, my question was, do you guys have any advice for dealing with the media? They come out to our things, but I have to have this one reporter to make sure he actually reports things accurately with what happened at our rally and whatnot. And that's annoying, but it has to be done. Do you guys have any tips with dealing with reporters, news media, etc.?
Okay.
Well, what we did with the Student Progressive Alliance that we formed, we actually created our own newspaper. So we published every event, story, and everything, and then we distributed it out throughout campus. That was a way of dealing with the media because the collegian, our media, you just took everything and turned it around. So we were like, screw this, we're going to make our own stuff. That's how we dealt with that.
Yeah, for us, we are really, really careful with everything that we say to the media because if they can construe something in a way that makes you look ridiculous or puts you in a bad light, then they will. So, like, there's a reason I'm in a suit today because I try to present myself as not what they think we are. The media tends to look at Occupy as a bunch of entitled kids, they're hanging out in a park and they don't really know what they're doing. And I try to show up in my little suit and go, no, we have a point, and there are some real ills and real bad things going on, and you need to listen to us. And it's a constant discussion that we're having. Like, here's the point that we want to get across to the media, so here's the best way that we can phrase this, and the easiest, like, the way that we think is the hardest for them to twist into something that we don't actually want to be saying.
Yeah, I think to some extent the corporate media is gonna twist this. So I think creating our own media is necessary. I think the way that it's been framed as the 99% versus 1% has been a way to a way that's something that, like, when I call my mom in North Dakota and tell her what I'm doing, like, she can get down with, like, me protesting at a bank and my friends getting arrested for trying to move their money or something. Like, there's something that's, like, that's very, like, unifying with that. So that's the framing of it is one thing. And then also, I think, creating your alternative or your own media. The live stream, for example, has been a way for people for us to develop our own media, but also a way for people who maybe are in an office and can't be at the protest because they have to work. They're able to follow them on Twitter. They're able to spread word through that and use the social media not as something in and of itself by liking a Facebook page and like patting yourself on the back, but using it as a tool and a conduit for getting our message across and reaching more people. And the thing that Jake said about like what do we do as revolutionaries, something about that. I mean, our system's like so fucked up that growing a garden in a vacant lot is civil disobedience. Like, so that people can eat produce. There was a huge garden grown in the Bronx that the city plowed over because they didn't have a permit or something. Like, because people, although there's a huge produce center in the Bronx, people living in that community don't have access to that. Like, it's a big problem. So they found a solution of growing a garden, and it's like plowed over the city, and taking things like from just protesting to actual resistance. I think is the big challenge that we have ahead of us in 2012, and I think we have to not only protest the meeting where the panel for education policy is deciding that they're going to shut down schools in New York City, and actually also take it a step further and occupy those schools are being threatened to be shut down, as they did in Chicago at the Piccolo School. So I think, taking it beyond like, I'm really mad about this, which is important and has a role, but then also, taking action and doing something that we hope will seek very specific, real reforms or make positive changes that will address our needs.
And also, on campuses, it's really important to reach out to the media. One of the things that we're doing for March 1st is that all of our members of Occupy Temple, we are all writing like press releases to deliver to all of our local news sources, so that we can try to get them on our campus. And we have in the past been able to get different news sources to come to our campus to cover our events. And in terms of what you were talking about with setting up your own newspaper, I actually have to say I've been pretty impressed with the way that Temple News has covered our events. I think for the most part they've always been pretty positive and honest. There hasn't been a lot of a sort of twisting of Occupy Temple's actions like you see a lot in mainstream media. So that's been really, I think, a cool thing that we've been able to work a little closer with them.
The student paper has been so supportive. The administrative paper definitely not very twisted, and they try to pretty much put everything, like all the political action, they try to put it on one person's responsibility for things going on over there. So I mean, yeah, good point. But student paper.
Yeah, the student paper.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Nope. Okay. Let's go ahead and thank our speakers for coming out.